So, in this session, we're just going to talk about some of the affected communities that will be, where these new maps will be implemented. We're going to go over the timelines for the coastal flood study, where we're at right now, and what to expect in the coming months. Also utilizing, as I've been stressing, the flood risk tools. And at the end, we're going to have a group discussion. I encourage all of you in the room and online to ask as many questions as possible, because there are representatives from FEMA and NJDEP here who set a lot of the regulations. So if you have specific questions, please ask them, because these are it's very valuable that they're offering their time to us today. So, and it's very rare that we get a lot of these folks in the same room at the same time. So I will just stress that during the group discussion. But that will be coming at the end. Again, the agenda is affected communities, the coastal flood study timelines, the tools, and a group discussion at the end. As Tom was saying before, the preliminary work maps were an interim FEMA product, development for the revised flood insurance rate maps based on the new coastal flood study. They replaced the advisory-based flood elevation maps. That also, the advisory-based flood elevation maps, they were the best available data, and with that, based on the new information for coastal areas, they did not have the overland wave analysis information associated with those delineations. But the preliminary work maps do have the storm surge analysis information plus the overland wave analysis. That's why you see, if you're familiar with the succession of the different maps being issued, a lot of the V zones were brought back in a lot of areas, which was to be expected because of they were able to determine the wave heights going over land in more detail. And these reflect the results of the ongoing coastal flood hazard study for New York and New Jersey. So, what's happened? We produced, or they have produced, updated firms for 14 coastal counties in New Jersey and New York. This is a huge area for this type of study. They've done very in-depth analysis for this entire geographic region. And as I said before, it includes the coastal storm surge analysis for the entire geographic area based on high detailed elevation information and coastal flood hazard components. And the tasks that were involved with this coastal flood study, just to give you an idea of what's going on, they've restudied all the coastal hazard zones. And I'm going to show you a difference between the effective maps and what has been done based on this new coastal flood study. But the most important part was to acquire all the information necessary to do the flood study and characterize the local storm climate. As you understand and are aware, storms can have different intensities and different frequencies throughout time, so they really need to understand what types of storms impact this coastal area. With that, they need to develop the input for the numerical modeling. That's how they do that from all the different storm simulations that they were able to derive for this region, hurricanes, nor'easters, things like that. With that, they were able to analyze the storm surge heights associated with those modeled storms, conduct the wave height analysis, which is the WAFIS program, which I described before, the wave height for flood insurance studies at individual transects. And I'll actually show you how many transects there are. You can see those where all the map transects are in the online web viewer, which I showed before. Unfortunately, it wasn't allowing that, but if you go on later, you can absolutely see when you check on all the information that are associated with that. And that's how they established the base flood elevations based on the storm surge elevation, the still waters, plus the wave heights. Now, the difference between the effective maps, which were done upwards of 20, 30 years ago, and the new coastal flood study, is that topographic data. The effective study used information from the 70s, 1980s. But the new information was based on LiDAR elevation data, which was collected by airplane shooting lasers down at the ground, measuring the return, and getting elevations at approximately 1 point per square meter throughout the entire region. And all the elevations for Ocean County and Atlantic Ocean, Southern Monmouth, and a lot of the other areas were based on 2010 elevation information. And they were able to combine the topographic information with bathymetric data for all the bays, embayments, rivers, lagoons, things like that. and create one gigantic seamless elevation model for an entire county. That's a lot of work that went into that, but it's a 10-foot resolution. It's pretty impressive. Now, the other big thing to remember is that model transects that they did for their wave height analysis, they only used 13 for a lot of these areas. Now there's 135. So tremendous amount more of modeling that was involved with these new delineations. They also, the effective map did not include wave setup, the runoff, or limit of moderate wave action. And for the new study, they included all of that information. And this graphic here just shows you what setup, still water elevation, runoff actually looks like on a primary frontal dune. So you have wave approaching the coast. As wave approaches the coast, you get what's called wave setup, or a higher increased elevation on the beach. And then you actually get runup, or a swash running up the beach and running down. So that combined elevation gets included in for a baseball elevation for a zone. Now, in the previous flood study, they used these tide gauges, 3, for their surge information. The new surge study used the AdCirc model and based on a very fine resolution mesh. So they were actually able to use all the elevation information based on these triangulated areas to determine storm surge elevation through the entire geographic region. A lot of information and detail is involved with this new coastal flood study. And ultimately, they were able to do digital mapping for the public and local officials so that people can see what their base flood elevations are, which we've been describing. All of these zones, which were described previously, come up in an interactive web map now. So you can check on the A zone, B zone, the limited water or wave action now. Primary frontal dune is not in there right now. That would be part of your flood risk database, but that will come later in individual communities. So the first thing that comes up, and this is the process for the entire coastal flood study process. The biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, and one of the hardest things to do is the terrain processing, all that LiDAR information. There's millions and millions and millions of elevation data points that get constructed into a three-dimensional surface for the entire region. And then you have to combine that information with information from all the coastal embayments, the ocean, all the elevation from under the water, which is really hard to get. And from that, they do their storm surge analysis using something called the AdCirc model, which has become a standard for a lot of coastal storm surge modeling. And then they do their starting wave condition analysis. And after that, they do their field reconnaissance after they do their wave height analysis. So in their field reconnaissance for at these different transects, they can see where bulkhead elevations are, buildings, vegetation, basically the surface roughness across the transect to see how far a wave will actually propagate inland when a wave approaches the shoreline. Once they do that, they're actually able to delineate the frontal dune, the primary frontal dune, along the coastline. And with that, they can actually calculate what's called the 540 rule, or 540 square feet of a primary frontal dune. The regulations state if a cross-sectional dune area is primary frontal dune above the still water elevation is more than 540 square feet, it won't erode in the overland wave analysis, but if it's less than that, it gets modeled into an eroded profile. And then from there, they see how far a 3-foot wave will propagate inland. And then in that, they can do their storm-induced erosion, which I just described, how much erosion will occur along a transect that are mapped. And this is exactly what I was just saying. Once they do the storm-induced erosion, they can calculate how far inland will a 3-foot wave or a 1.5-foot wave propagate to get that limwa area. And then finally, they delineate their floodplain boundary based on storm surge elevations plus their overland wave analysis. So those two things get combined. So that's why the ABFBs and the preliminary work maps were different in those aspects, where a lot of the zones got refined because there was more information available, and it's the best available information at the time. For wave runoff, They did run up for all model beaches, bluffs, cliffs, and coastal structures. And what's different now is they calculate the top 2% of the run-up elevation. So it's the extreme, the highest part of the run-up. In previous studies, they only used the mean run-up, so it wasn't calculating the most risk involved with an approaching wave along the shoreline. And some of the methods in the modeling software they use were Runup 2.0, Ice Shore, TAW, some of those different modeling packages. The Runup software is part of the CHAMP package, and that's for all their coastal hazards analysis. That's publicly available on the FEMA website. It includes the WAFIS model, CHAMP, erosion, all those things. So you can take the model transects, view them in that software, and run the different models that FEMA Region 2 and the RAMP team actually did for delineating all these zones. Yeah, gotcha. This is what the Runup transect looks like from a model transect in ArcGIS, or a GIS, Geographic Information System software. So this is one of the beauties of having geographic information, because you can convey it in multiple ways. To give you an idea of what it looks like, so this highlighted transect here is what's shown in the cross-section here. So you can see what stillwater elevation is from the surge analysis. But you can get the run-up elevation plus the stillwater elevation. And then as you approach a coastline or a shoreline, you can see how the reduction in run-up and wave elevation, or run-up elevation, reduces as you go over land. So then you can determine your new floodplain boundary. So pretty fascinating stuff that this could be modeled in those areas. Primary frontal dune delineations for the coastal high hazard areas are the V zones. This is looking north along the coastline. You can see this is actually a dune field, and these are the model transects going across. So in a lot of cases, the primary frontal dune is the extent of the V zone if it's not eroded during a modeled storm event or a 1% storm. So you can see the red line here represents an actual V zone boundary, and this is the primary frontal dune here. So all this information will be made available to you for individual towns for doing all your own analysis and mitigation actions. This is what the actual delineation looks like in the WebMap viewer or in the Geographic Information System software. In this case, the limit of moderate wave action and the V zone are coincident with each other. So the waves will actually, based on regulatory boundaries, will just stop right here after the primary frontal dune. And that's probably because the cross-section of that area isn't completely eroded, or the wave heights are less than 1.5 feet past the zones that are modeled along these transects. So you can see the eroded profile here, but they're not showing the wave height elevations, but as the dune erodes based on the cross-section, you'll see another cross-section wave elevations come down as you move inland. I said this before, but the difference between the advisory base flood elevation maps and the preliminary work maps, the ABFEs were based upon the best available data at that time and intended to serve as an interim product for people who really needed to rebuild, as Tom said before. But these preliminary work maps are replaced the ABFEs. They're the best available data, and as I said before, they're based upon more refined shoreline analysis. And this is kind of a repeat of what we saw before, but this is what the preliminary work maps look like. But the actual preliminary firms are more representative of what you would actually get as a firm map once it becomes adopted and effective. So you would actually have all the description of the zones and all the different delineations, but also the preliminary firms show the transects where the modeling is done for all the different zones. But if I'm correct, the final firms do not have the transects on them. Correct? Yeah.
Well, it does.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is going to go a little bit more in detail what the limit of moderate wave action is. It's for the 1% annual chance coastal flood hazard area where the base flood height is between 1.5 and 3 feet. Waves could damage these areas, and in a lot of places, if a dune erodes or a dune is eroded once after the elevations used for the analysis are adopted and it is breached, you will have waves that can exceed the or can be between 1.5 and 3 feet. So even though there's no special floodplain management standards, it may be in your best interest to adopt higher standards in these areas for building. So communities are encouraged to adopt the more stringent building construction for V zones in these limited and moderate wave action areas. This is just going in here. There is a video associated with this. I'm not going to attempt it on this computer because I'm afraid it's going to crash it. But basically, what this video shows is the actual wave elevation associated with when a wave comes onshore and erodes profile. What is the elevation of that height? And then, as you see the wave elevations go down, you can see where they delineate that boundary of limited and moderate wave action. So these are the different boundaries that we have on a flood map. You have your 2% annual chance of a 500-year flood, a really, really big storm event. And then you have your A zone, which is areas that are less than 1.5 foot in waves. And then you also have your limited and moderate wave action. So you can actually see on the base side of this area, you have the VG11. And then you can see the limited and moderate wave action actually comes in here. So you could have 1.5 to 3 foot waves in these specific areas. And then also you get your Luant coincident with a beach dune system on the oceanfront coastline. So with the preliminary work maps, there's been some high-level changes. And the main reason is there's indications that coastal flood risk will increase in the future. So communities and the public need to prepare and plan accordingly with mitigation actions and conveying this risk to the public. With that comes an associated oversized overall increase in the V zones when compared to the current effective maps. And from what we're seeing, there's limited increases in the overall size in the A zones from the current maps. But those areas have been identified. But there has been V zone reduction from the ABFEs to the preliminary work maps, so I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. So these are all the affected communities and counties, basically all the coastal counties, plus Gloucester, Camden, Burlington, Union, Westchester counties. Pretty much all the way stretching from New York Harbor all the way around Cape May, up Delaware River, Delaware Bay Shore as well.
And the red highlighted are the ones that have preliminary.
Yes, yeah. The areas in red are the ones that have preliminary work maps at this time. This is just showing you what bluff erosion looks like in Monmouth County. If any of you are familiar with Monmouth County, they have an eroding coastal bluff. It's heavily armored, but in some cases, even after Hurricane Sandy, the armoring in a lot of places was destroyed, and we saw a lot of bluff erosion, which I've never seen before in my life in Monmouth County, which would indicate that an elevation of 20 foot at the bluff was eroding. I mean, you have a wave higher than that, which is pretty impressive. So this is what the modeling actually looks like for the bluff erosion. So you can see in one of these model transects here, what they were able to do is determine the flood zone boundaries based on the model of erosion. So you can see how much the actual profile had eroded. So you can see as a wave hits this cross section here, there's material eroded from here, but then it's deposited out here. So all this can be done running all these different models in the GM software. But for Monmouth County, the Limois in here sit inside of the zone. And if you see these little arrows here, it points to the area of higher hazard. So this is the boundary. This sliver here would be the area where you would have a 1.5 to 3 foot wave. And then obviously seaward of that is your V zone, where you have 3 foot waves or higher. The timeline for Monmouth right now, the coastal flood study for everywhere started in 2009. There's been multiple meetings with local officials. There's been updates. There's been webinars. There's been an introduction to the risk map program in 2011 for Monmouth. Hazard mitigation planning occurred in December 2011. Excuse me. The risk assessment timeline. There's post-Sandy ABFEs issued in December 2012 following Hurricane Sandy. And there's been also multiple meetings. We've been involved in some of them with local officials and FEMA Region 2 and the NJDEP. And then for the preliminary work maps, there was a webinar in June 2013 to go over that for folks in Monmouth County. For Ocean County, same situation. Around the same time, Ocean County maps were released in the summertime for the preliminary work maps. This is just showing you what the still water elevation wave height analysis and runoff looks like. You can see that there's overtopping in this specific area where you have your still water elevation that was modeled in that, based on the elevation model. You can get your wave height here, but once you add the runoff plus the still water elevation, you get overtopping in this area. So this is then what would be considered an AO zone. So that's what's called, you get sheet flow on the back side of bluff or an eroding dune. The timeline, again, for Ocean County started in 2009 with this coastal flood study. The introduction to risk map, again, took place in July 2011. There's been hazard mitigation planning meetings in December. As NFIP and CRS workshops, that occurred in March 2011. And then the risk assessment, the post-Sandy ABFEs, again, were issued in December 2012, and the preliminary work maps were issued in June for Ocean County. So these have been available for quite some time. Atlantic County, same situation. This is just another example of what the map looks like in Atlantic County and what an eroded profile looks like. So all this modeling has been done and is available to you online. The risk map, again, took place in July 2011, and the prelim work maps were in over the summer as well. And then there's been webinars for local officials, and they're really trying to give as much information to you as possible. So if you have any questions, you can address it to the people who actually do the work and model it. And Cape May, the preliminary work maps came out in the fall. And again, the advisory base flood elevations were issued in December 2012 for the different areas. There's been multiple meetings, and basically there's been the risk map was also introduced around the same time. There's been hazard mitigation planning. The NFIP and CRS workshop, again for Cape May, took place in 2012. But as Tom was saying before, the timeline right now, we're here. There's been preliminary work map release. The next up, they're going to be actually releasing the preliminary flood insurance rate map. So each individual town will be getting the hard copy maps. And they'll be released to the general public as well. Once that happens, there's going to be a resilience meeting. And once that happens, then you're going to be meeting with, there's going to be a post-release preliminary firm flood insurance meeting. There's going to be your 90-day appeal period. And then there's going to be post-appeal. It's just going over the regulatory process again. So for the new map to become adopted and effective, you have to get through this entire process, which can take, what's the time frame? About 2 years? 2 years maximum. So. And again, once you get your preliminary firm maps and you have questions, we are available to answer them if you have questions. Yeah.
Can you talk about the timeline for the pre-firm release for Ocean County?
So the preliminary map release, there is a rough estimate to be the release of these maps in early 2014, around March timeframe, but there's no set date at the moment. So the process of the study timeline, you have your flood risk review meeting once these maps are issued, and then you've got your resilience meeting. And this is actually your first opportunity for the community to review preliminary maps, flood insurance study, and flood risk data sets with the people who did the work. And then you have your consultation coordination officer, and this is a meeting with a public official, and you can actually talk about the changes between the old maps and the newer maps. And then you actually have your public open house going over to the maps. And you can actually meet with your residents, discuss the changes, and address any concerns that they have. So the appeal process, yeah.
Will it be, will those meetings and that timeline be with individual towns or will it be county by county?
County.
It'll be county by county.
There might be multiple in the county, but it's depending on the population.
Yeah. As I said before, you'll have 90 days for the appeal process, and then you'll need to, if you have an appeal, you have to supply scientific and technical information, and that's going to be submitted through community officials. And then following the appeal, FEMA will finalize the maps, and then, as I say, initiate a 6-month compliance period before the formal adoption of the maps. And then once the compliance period is up, the updated firms are considered your new effective flood insurance rate maps. Once these maps are adopted, the NJDEP has a model ordinance for all these different maps. And then compliance is based upon the best available flood hazard data, whichever imposes more stringent requirement. And then you'll have to consult with your local building official for looking at all the different changes to the new maps. Now I'm going to go over the flood risk tools that are going to be produced. These are what are considered the non-regulatory products that are being part of the risk map program. The things that we're going to be looking at are the changes since last firm, the flood depth grids, and the areas of mitigation interest. Part of the risk map program, you're going to be getting what's called a flood risk database, but also a flood risk report and your flood risk map. So all these new products are tools for locals to actually use for your own benefit, for your hazard mitigation plans, conveying information to the public in your communities. So in addition to all this, you can get a flood risk assessment, which is a refined HAZUS analysis. If you're not aware, HAZUS is a software developed by FEMA that can actually project damages and costs associated with different storm events and probabilistic storm events and actual storm events. You can take information from an actual storm and see what would happen if you changed some of the conditions, different building footprints, elevations, things like that. This is an example of the changes since last firm data set that you will be getting. This is comparing the effective maps between the advisory-based flood elevations. So this is actually not going over, obviously, since the new firms haven't been issued yet. But this is just giving you an example of what had happened. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that a lot of the B zones that were in the advisory-based flood elevation maps got converted into A zones. So you can see this green represents B to an AE zone. So they're basically taking all the floodplain boundaries and combining them and finding those areas of change. So you'll be able to if you have building footprints for your individual town, which the DEP is actually quantifying right now and creating maps for, you'll be able to quantify how many areas or how many structures are within the A zone, B zone, things like that, and how many have changed zones. These are perhaps some of the coolest products that you'll be able to use. If you have several properties that are repeat areas that are flooded and constantly damaged, you can actually say, well, you can actually see during a 100-year event the actual depth of water at that location during a given storm event. And then you can start doing different things like adding 1 foot of sea level rise, things like that for given storm events. That's part of an additional non-reg product, but it really helps to show what would happen in a 100-year event if you added 1 foot of sea level rise. Would that footprint get smaller? What would be the depth? What would be the potential damages in those areas? So these data products are very, very valuable. And then you get your areas of mitigation interest. These areas of mitigation interest are areas that are identified during the discovery phase in a lot of cases, where towns can talk to the FEMA Region 2 representatives and saying, we're very interested in this area for beach replenishment or stormwater management or creating excuse me, dams, levees, things like that for riverine systems. So those are actually, in GIS, are actually individual points and locations on a map that identify specific mitigation actions that your town can take, and then you can actually share that information with your local, with the public. So this is what's going to be happening in the near future for all the coastal communities. You're going to be provided with this information, and I believe the DEP is working on this right now. You're going to be getting your water surface elevation grids, the actual surface of water in relative to the NAVD88 datum. With that, and using a digital elevation model, that's how they create the depth grids, so they can subtract those two elevations to get the depth of water during a given storm event. 1%, 5-year, 0.2% storm. Your flood risk assessments, your primary frontal dune, which this represents. You can see, it's maybe hard to see, but there's individual transects where they do their overland wave analysis and their erosion assessment, and they can interpolate here what the relative elevation across the dune is. They can see if the dune is just eroded or it's completely removed based on the volume of material in the primary frontal dune. So this is very powerful for oceanfront communities who are concerned about oceanfront homeowners and wave energy after they do a mitigation action in primary frontal dune, things like that. And this is your 1% annual chance flood grid. But this is also showing what the water depth would be if you added 1 foot on top of the base flood elevation for a 100-year event or a 1% event. So in that case, as I said before, if you added 1 foot sea level rise, 2 feet, 3 feet. So these are very new products that haven't really been looked at before, but they're going to be very useful for you in the future conveying community risk. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the Region 2 coastal site is the place to go for a lot of this information. We're going to be posting all of this information from these two sessions as a MP3 file on YouTube, so you can come back and review it and share it with everyone that you need to for specific information. And the whole goal of this, as we've been saying, is we're creating a community resilience is key for the future. Information is indicating that storm intensity is going to increase and frequency is going to increase. So we really need to start preparing now to be proactive as opposed to reactive in terms of hazard mitigation. With that, we're just going to end the day with a lengthy group discussion. If anyone has any specific questions regarding what we went over today or special concerns.
I had a question about the primary frontal view calculation. Is that just taking place at the line of the transect, or is it taking place at the low points of the dune in areas that don't have any engineered dunes?
It's at the transect.
So only at the transect.
Yeah. So since it's just a two-dimensional cross section, they have to interpolate between transects. So it's not actually, since they're using a square footage in a cross section for the 540, they have to interpret between those two transects, if I'm correct. Yeah, online question?
Was wave setup included in the storm surge surface rasters for each coastal county?
No, that's just for the overland wave analysis. Okay. Right? Is that right?
Right. For 1%, the wave component is included, but the rest is just the local list. I will always.
Okay. Questions? No?
Just back to what we're trying to get a handle on is the new mapping coming out, and that's going to probably be another 20 years still. Who knows? If we go from dinosaur map to dinosaur map to my and with the changes in the climate, sea level rise is coming, and that's not in the map, it's really extrapolated for communities like my community ocean cities doing too, which is great.
Yeah.
And their heights at 3 in some areas where if they would have called them for those, and that would have touched the ground. The issue we're trying to get a handle on is how are communities going beyond just the taking this data, the mapping, building these hazard mitigation plans for seeding. Typically, they're very broad type stuff.
Yeah.
We talk with community officials. Our industry is looking to capitalize to meet the needs of 300,000 units that we're going to have to elevate in the state in 50 years.
Right.
Is basically what we're looking at, or relocate as the water comes up. One thing that we're pushing as an industry is to somehow get communities to do an inventory of some sort. Right now, they have elevation certificates for new construction, and anything that's elevated has to provide an elevation certificate. But you still have that big global elephant in there that's not tagged, and we don't know how many. We've got that new data from NFIP that says 88,000 NFIP structures in New Jersey are non-compliant. Florida has 265,000. Those are some numbers we're seeing, but we really don't have that. It's like the communities aren't able to make that next really scary step is how many are we looking at? What are we looking at? Civic buildings, churches, multifamily, as an inventory, so that us as an industry can look at it and say, okay, we need $500 million in capitalization over the next 20 years to build enough machines, get enough crews up and running to do 200,000 elevation possibilities in 50 years. It's that big elephant that we're still missing, that we'd really love to work with communities and New Jersey Association of Floodplain Managers and put maybe some capital in to getting surveys like that. How do the communities pay for a survey? Number one. I'm going to give you all that. But maybe there's a partnership with NJDEP, FEMA, to get that inventory under control so we know when you can plan over 20 years, okay, I've got to help me as a community 3,000 a year in 20 years in order to get to my 20 or 30,000 in my community that aren't compliant. To avoid the walkaways and to avoid the resales at way reduced rates because they're not compliant structures and they're having to sell them for 200,000 less because they're having to give away the cost of the elevation project. Those real revenue runners of these communities. We're just looking. They all wanted me to come today to again reiterate that we want to work with New Jersey, work with communities as an industry, and help get this a little better defined beyond just the mapping as a base.
Right.
Then we got to get
the decisions need to be made.
And when you're in a political environment, it's a beach summer community. They really don't want the disruptions. They don't want it to be a fearful place to invest in. So we all have to work together.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why we're here today. We really need to be talking about these different options for the future.
Well, one thing that the DEP is working on as part of their CCC with FEMA is to develop the building footprints for all of the coastal areas. So that's something that all the communities are going to be provided with. It's a building footprint shapefile that can be opened up in GIS. What that gives you is an attribute table for each footprint, and we're going to try to tie it with parcel data. So now you have parcel data, you have the building footprint, the first floor elevation or the lowest adjacent grade. That's something that, once that's surveyed, that could be populated into this shapefile, and it's going to take some work to do that, but that's something the community can take all the information we're giving them, and then, if they want to do a little survey, then they can have all that information you're talking about in a GIS format.
We're talking billions of dollars of work.
For sure.
To get it. Data plugs in, and we have repetitive plug structures, and insurance goes up, and all of it.
So what I'm saying is the framework will be set up to have the tools to have all that
I think that would be really
information.
Visionary for this state, especially with density. Because it's so dense compared to the Gulf War. It's a major deal.
Excuse me, did you say they are doing that, or that's something that can be done?
The footprints?
Yeah,
when you say they, the DEP is actually working on developing the footprints in a shapefile format that can be opened up in GIS. So we'll have the building footprint. What we're also going to do is once we get that footprint, we're going to combine parcel data with the footprint, so you have additional information associated with each footprint. Well, what we don't have is, what's the lowest adjacent grade elevation? The communities might have a lot of elevation certificates already, so they can start to populate this shapefile with that information. Then the ones that don't have the elevations need to be surveyed. Once they're surveyed, that can be populated. Once you have a GIS shapefile, building footprint, first wall elevations, you could overlay that on the floodplain and know exactly how much you need to elevate the structure. So it'll be a powerful tool. We're setting up the framework, and we're going to be providing all this information. It's going to be public information, all the footprints. We're developing all the footprints for all the coastal areas, all the 500-year floodplains, all the coastal areas along the whole Atlantic coast, from Cape May to Bergen County. We're also doing Delaware Bay, Salem, Cumberland, Western Canton. So all these building footprints are going to be available for all the communities and counties.
Let me just add, though, that I think, you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about this information becomes outdated. Everything becomes outdated. But it is up to you, as the local community, to adopt maybe a higher standard or be more forward thinking. We always set the baseline. And if you want to do the bare minimum, well then, you pay the price eventually. So that's why we encourage that thought. Mitigation as a way of doing business, as a way of governing. Let's think about it. Let's think down the line, because these events will keep happening, and they may happen in greater severity. What can we do next? So, I feel like we're thinking that way, and we all agree with you. But there is no quick solution to this. This is going to be a long process, and that's why you guys are here.
Continual in the future, so it has to be a dynamic thing. We're just constantly updating.
Since Katrina, my town's 82% elevated. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's great.
Fifth hurricane in 9 years last year. We only had 42 instead of 500. Substantial damage. So we're working.
What was the percentage before the
maybe 10-15%. But we didn't issue any building permits on some dams until they agreed to elevate as part of the rebuild. New Jersey, because of the numbers and the political forces, has had to make some other decisions, which just puts it out there for 4 years. And between now and 4 years, we got a lot of decision making. How do you fund it? Do you do community bonding? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to get this done, and you got to get it done, otherwise we pay the price again. And so, how do we do it? How do we make it happen? We're struggling with that as an industry.
Well, this is great. Thank you. This discussion's going well. Are there any other topics or any other questions that anyone has? Anyone online?
Yeah, I guess you asked to see discuss exomes, 500-year versus no risk individual math products. 500-year
0.2%. Well, what's a specific question?
Can you discuss exomes, 500-year versus no risk individual math products?
Well, one thing to keep in mind, too, is that, especially in a coastal area, a 500-year zone, even though it may be out of the 1% chance flood, there's always a chance that it may flood. It's a 0.2% chance in any given year, which is a very, very large storm event. But also keep in mind that, we've been saying before, that storm frequency and intensity, all the models are saying that everything's going to be increasing in the future. So just keep in mind that a 0.2% chance flood now might not be that in the future. So just keep that in mind, especially when you tack on, sea level rise, things like that. It's very hard to project exactly how much and where and what to be specific, but it's good to prepare now, even in a 500-year event in a coastal area, especially.
Talking about potential 2-meter rise in 100 years. That's all my question.
Yeah.
Should the community be concerned that everyone new not account for sea level property owners raise your homes to be ADFEs with freeboard. There is 25 years down the road that elevation of the structure will be high.
Well, there's always a risk, but that's why you take on freeboard.
With freeboard.
I mean, if they're going 3 feet above base flood, I mean, it should be okay in the next 15 years or so. But if there's always a risk, but adopting a stricter standard is the best option for the future. So adding more freeboard. So the town can adopt a stricter standard too.
And as it elevates, the population will become more comfortable with the higher elevations. Right now, the resistance is, I just want to go to the minimum. I don't want to walk up 6 more flights of stairs, 6 more steps. And I keep telling them, on the Gulf, the minimum gets what? So go up.
Yeah.
Get more discount. Never have to worry. The map changes will come and go. If you want to do it once and it's Wi-Fi, you don't want to elevate twice or 3 times in the structure twice.
Well, the Gulf is a little different. They have a little subsidence issue as well.
What is yours?
Not as much.
Yeah. You're the other big subsidence.
Yeah.
Just a note on, I guess, I don't know what the question of mine is leading to, but we've noticed that some areas on Long Beach Island now are 500-year or out of the special flood hazard area. But what we've also noticed is that in Sandy, some of those structures in that area were actually substantially damaged. So you can see that, I mean, although we're mapping 1% annual chance flood events, you're going to have damages outside of those areas. So you really need to incorporate freeboards, additional freeboards, and again, like Thomas was saying, I mean, FEMA setting the minimum. I mean, when you have a storm event like Sandy, that's greater than the minimum. And in some areas it was less, in some areas it was a lot. So you're gonna, even though the map might show that you're in a 500-year or not a special flood hazard area, risk is always there, especially on the barrier islands. You're gonna have risk. So I'd always caution and try to err on the side of caution and try to elevate as much as possible. And with discussions on future changes, I mean, things are always going to be going up higher, so you're better off going as high as you can now, so you're more resilient in the future.
When you're talking about those areas on Long Beach Island that did receive flooding into that they were in the X zone, is there any, what sort of damage are they receiving? Was it sheet flooding coming?
No, I mean, I know that we've identified, the local communities have actually identified substantially damaged structures in those areas. What that means is that the structures receive more than 50% of their market value damage. So it's significant damage, and it could have been wave related.
And shouldn't those areas then be included in the new A zones, the new idea of just A zones that are out there?
It should, but all the modeling that's been done shows it's not. So, you can't. I mean, that's what the modeling shows, but, when we're just showing a 1% annual chance. I mean, the event might have been higher than that in that area. So, this is what the modeling shows. This is what FEMA needs to map. And, FEMA gives you all the disclaimers, hey, this is minimum standard. We're producing these other non-regulatory products. With the one that shows the 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot rise with a 1% annual chance, it's going to be a powerful tool where the community can actually adopt one of those maps. So in these areas where you have a 500-year or next zone, might be shown as being impacted when you have a 1, 2, 3 foot rise. So maybe the community might want to adopt a standard or add some additional freeboard.
Can I just based on what Joe was saying, there was this huge misconception that when a storm event occurred, it had a uniform effect of the whole state. Everyone told me with 500-year or 100-year. It is very possible that in certain areas in New Jersey that the impact is far greater than 500%, or 22%. And in that case, they may be getting flooded, but we are only legislated to show the delineate the risk of the 1%.
to 22%. After that, flooding can occur. There's no such thing as you are in a no-risk area. We are all at risk, and so that's something to really consider. But again, these storms do not happen. It's not a uniform blanket event for everyone. And so that's something that it's hard to think about. But on the island, I don't know what the impact was. I don't know what the high water marks were, but it is very possible that they had a very different experience than people in that area.
Yeah, I mean, as you documented, you've seen the high water marks vary greatly depending on where it was.
So most of it in Monmouth, V zone along the ocean front.
Yeah.
X shaded X, and then 8 E zones. Damage in those X and shaded X was mostly from debris. Wave action and debris carrying across. Flood water from the bay never reached that elevation. Lava left, you're talking about maybe your grade on the bay side, 3.5 feet versus oceanfront, 14. So that water never got up into those ocean blocks, any bay water, which would cause a flood. But the debris certainly caused a significant amount of damage to many homes, which are now in that X and shaded X.
The other thing you got to consider too is substantial damage. You really got to look at destruction. I mean, these areas on the island I lived there, where the homes were built pre-World War II, the destruction is valued at $40,000. So substantial damage is $20,000 a penny.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Not the land value, construction method.
Exactly. And that's what everybody gets.
Right.
Yeah. And very often the values in the way.
Yes.
And media construction.
Yes.
Who's responsible to enforce the 4-year limit once you declare substantial damage structure to be raised? Is it the community? Because we keep that as part of the substantial.
One of the things that I guess the communities were doing to make it easier for residents was that they would try and move back into their, especially the primary homeowners, move back into their homes. But if they were substantially damaged, the 4 years ICC, increased cost compliance, gives you 4 years, so that's sort of probably where the 4 years came from. But the community is responsible to make sure that resident raises that home at the end of the 4 years, and there's insurance implications if the resident does.
All right, the insurance, but as a community, what am I supposed to do? Do I have to have an ordinance ready to start?
Within a final CO, it should be a temporary, some kind of temporary.
They do that, but in 4 years.
No mayor.
It's difficult, but there should be no final CO. So that's always held over their head. If they want to try and sell the house, it's an issue if the CO is still open. So
now, a follow-up on the X homes. We have substantial damage properties in that X area.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, they don't need to raise. But in reality, they do need to raise. How do you, because our enforcement is tied up to base elevation plus freeboard.
They're not basable elevation. You tolerate with the freeboard. So, it's in their best interest to do some type of mitigation. But I see what you're saying. Now you could upgrade your ordinance, like I said. Once the maps are finalized and the non-direct tools are available, one of the tools is going to be where you show that 1 foot rise, 2 foot rise.
Right. That's all good, but then they go to grants to raise the property, and they say you're not in the flood zone,
right.
So
and I've seen they won't get any ICC money either because they're not in the special hazard area.
Yeah, but they were. They weren't special. They were before.
Okay, and now you say now the maps.
So
well, if they were before, they just applied for the ICC before.
Yeah, they used to raise the house, and now they're asking us, okay, what elevation we're raising. So
do they damage by order?
Yes. Yes, because you go in and in this case, you get a property with no value in the building, and you're in substantial damage to it.
You can lower the grade for patients.
Just to quote on that, because these are very real issues for communities, and a lot of us nationally and stuff are talking about this, is it really a model for the Corps to become engaged in non-structural community-wide mitigation projects? Because FEMA is really an emergency response and an aftermath and gets you on the track to, and then the maps provide you that roadmap, but the Corps is really, I mean, the Corps has actually relocated 4 or 5 whole communities in the country to date. Maybe it's a community-wide elevation. The other topic is how do you finance and fund that as a community? Right now, you're only allowed to do revenue bonding for sewers and roads and large capital public improvements, but because of the pay basis effective here, maybe communities have to be allowed to revenue share bond or get a group of banks together to do. Or like the new federal FHA 203K repair mortgage product, they're now allowing foundations for the first time, so primary property owners can get an FHA loan that includes the repair cost plus the elevation cost, which has never been allowed before. And then you got all these second homes. 80% of the buildings are second homes, and they're not in any program because the government and the people look at it as a luxury, and it's not. It's a survival mode for these communities, and we've got to figure out how to get 40,000, 50,000 second homes. So how are we going to do that?
Good question.
All right, with that, I guess we can wrap it up. Thank you very much for coming out today. Really appreciate it. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us.